now I have the pleasure of introducing Reverend Rivka Gevurtz. She has spoken for us, with us before, for us, as us. Today's message is Turn, Return, and Remember, Nurturing Belonging at the Autumnal Equinox and Rosh Hashanah. And Reverend Rivka hails to us from Gresham. She's an interfaith minister and is especially interested in new moons and equinoxes and all things like that. So it's my pleasure to introduce you. Welcome you. Thank
you. Thank you, Alison. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's wonderful to be with you all again. So right about 2-3 minutes ago, on the other side of the world, in the southern hemisphere, a partial solar eclipse began. And it's going to continue till about 2:53, close to 3 o'clock. Equinoxes are powerful energies. Now, we think of today as being the 21st. Down there, this is the morning of the 22nd, which is the morning of the equinox. It's also the morning that begins the evening of Erev Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the world. It's a time where you have light and dark together in the equinox, ushering in the season of darkness. It's a balance for this moment, in the perfect balance of light and dark. I don't know about you, but it's pretty hard these days to have a sense of balance. Even with all my toolkits of spiritual practices, it's gotten pretty difficult at times. Not to fall into the despair and the continued need to tune out the heated voices and the fevered pitch rhetoric. As the dean of an interfaith seminary, I have to be conscious of the fact that words on our website like diversity, justice, and equality may lead to some negative scrutiny by those who right now don't share those values. And as the wife and mother of 2 trans people, as Tom lifted up in prayers of concerns, we have real reason to concern for the safety not only of our family, but of so many other families. And not just trans families, but families that are, in the larger queer community, families that are members of an ethnic group that is being targeted, women for our voting rights and our physical autonomy are all under attack. Themes of the autumnal equinox and of Rosh Hashanah are both about emphasizing a sense of renewal, but with reflection. Together they're a time of ingathering, when we turn away from that which no longer serves us, when we return to our essential selves, and when we're reminded and invited to remember, that is to lead into the nurturing of our sense of belonging to our communities, our families, our congregations, and the larger world. It's a time when we're empowered to build our resilience and experience gratitude. When we're called to collectively share the gifts of the harvest that many of us are experiencing at this season, which will sustain us in the coming season of darkness. So today's constellation of equinox and eclipse and birthday of the world actually marks a once-in-a-generation moment. This combination hasn't happened since 2015, and it's not going to happen for multiple generations. So it feels like an auspicious moment for us to sit back and reflect. Where the equinox grounds us in gratitude and restores balance, the nature of this particular eclipse is to push us to look at our shadow selves, to release our illusions in order to embrace transformation. The moon is, in this moment, moving between the earth and the sun, dimming the sun's light, just as the season as a whole is shifting towards darkness. Think of it as a cosmic reset, when everything begins anew, when transformations can be profound. Together, these spiritual energies create a cosmic threshold, and together they reflect the sacred journey which Rosh Hashanah and the equinox call us to. This sacred and magical time asks us to reflect on what we have, on what we've accomplished in this past year, to pause and take stock, and mostly to be deeply grateful, so that we can store up those resources and harvest what we've accomplished, to share the bounty. It's also a time to compost that which we no longer need, that which no longer serves us, to let it go. This time of year calls us to remember all that we have done and to consider whether we've done it wisely. It's a time to commit to change on the individual level and as a community. In the Jewish tradition, some of us have been spending this preceding month in a time of deep reflection that we call Heshbon HaNefesh, which translates to soul accounting. It's a time when, from Rosh Hashanah, prepares us all the way through Yom Kippur in 10 days, to really think about concepts like sin and repentance. In the dominant culture, and in particular the Catholic culture I grew up with, sin was a permanent mark on your soul and a one-way ticket to hell. Not so in Judaism. For one thing, there's nothing that can tarnish our soul. It's that part of the divine that lives within us and that we share connection with one another in the great unit of consciousness. The word chet, which is sin, is actually an archery term, meaning to miss the mark. It's not a final permanent failing. We human beings are going to miss the mark. We were never intended to be perfect, because it's in the failing and the trying again that we learn and grow spiritually. Bishop Desmond Tutu said it differently when he said, "There's nothing that cannot be forgiven, and there is no one undeserving of forgiveness." We're all broken, and out of that brokenness, we hurt others. The song we have been singing, Return Again, is a cherished melody, especially for Jews at this time of year, the high holidays. It's one of the first songs that I learned when I converted to Judaism 30 years ago. When our kiddo was little, it was the song that I often sang to them as a lullaby. For many folks, it's the song that we sing at the end of Shabbat, marking the separation of sacred time from secular. And just as it balances our internal places of light and dark, it also speaks to that hunger for hope and belonging. It's a song that epitomizes light and dark too, because of its composer, Reb Shlomo Carlebach. Reb Shlomo revitalized Jewish music in the second half of the 20th century. He reintroduced music as a vehicle and tool of spirit, at a time when Jews were disaffected and traumatized in the aftermath of the Holocaust. He brought music alive for many Jews across the spectrum, from ultra-Orthodox to Jewish renewal. But as much light as his music brought into the world, he also brought darkness, his shadow self was as a sexual predator against Jewish girls and women. It's taken decades for women singers in particular, not the least of whom was continues to be his daughter, Neshama Carlebach, to bring light back into his music. Neshama did this by making teshuvah, which is usually translated as repentance for the sins of her father, by meeting with each of the women that he harmed. She returned to them their sense of belonging, returned them to the land of their soul. Teshuvah actually means to turn. When we miss the mark, which we all are going to do, we try to get it right the next time. And true teshuvah is when we come to those back to those same situations and make a different choice. To do that, we have to look at ourselves honestly and compassionately, to turn away from our internal shadows towards our innate light. Rabbi Alan Lew, who is both a Jew and a Buddhist teacher, taught that unresolved elements of our lives, the unconscious patterns and conflicts and problems that seem to recur in our lives no matter where we go or who we're with, they are a way that we have to figure out what the underlying shadow story is. And it'll continue until we resolve them. It's much like what the folks in trauma work teach us, that we have to come back to the source of pain to heal it. He taught that in terms of our spiritual growth, what we need to do is ask ourselves very honestly, what is my complicity? How have my actions or inaction contributed to the challenges that I faced time and again? Has the illusion of American self-sufficiency stubbornly kept me from reaching out to my family and friends when I need support? Has self-righteousness prevented me from seeing the struggles of those who I disagree with, or who would demonize me as a Jew and as a queer person? Just as the indigenous and pagan traditions see this time as a time of returning to balance and equilibrium on this day of light and darkness, so too we're invited to examine, where is my life out of balance? How am I missing the mark? What values do I need to cultivate? Rabbi Rami Shapiro, who writes for Spirituality and Health, suggests that there's a very simple way for us to sit with these questions. He suggests that each evening, when we're getting ready to go to sleep, we ask ourselves, for instance, how compassionate, just how compassionate have I really been today? And in reviewing the situations of the day, when have you acted with compassion? When have been the times that you haven't acted with compassion? Can you see why you did it in one situation and not in another? So that's the work. That's the work of this season of turning inward, of ingathering, of cultivating our higher self. But to what end? Is it, just spiritual calisthenics? No. It's to cultivate a sense of belonging to ourselves within that unit of reality of spirit. And as a part of that unity, to cultivate belonging for those who would journey with us. So we do this soul searching, not only on an individual level, but with our partners, with our families, our congregations, and in this moment, we should be doing it collectively. How are we missing the mark of building a sense of belonging for ourselves and others? How are we cultivating that sense of belonging for others? In many indigenous cultures, the dark time, the winter time, was and still is devoted to sitting by the fire and listening and learning from the wisdom of the elders. In many communities, indigenous and settler, used to be that we would cultivate a harvest together, and then we would raise a barn for a neighbor and build friendships. We would nourish our connections by bringing a meal to a family that had experienced a loss. It didn't matter what they believed, what their politics were. That's what community did. Professor John Powell at UC Berkeley talks about how belonging is a fundamental human need, and that need plays a role in how we shape our society. So, if we're going to reset, how do we reset and cultivate belonging when instead of nourishing connections, food is rotting in the fields because farm workers have been hauled away by ice? When instead of building barns, we're dismantling the rights of refugees, trans folk, and women? When instead of listening to the wisdom of our elders, we are erasing their stories from government web pages and library bookshelves? Professor Powell goes on to say that there is a divide, and we've spoken to some of that already this morning in the concerns and prayers, that there's a divide right now in the world between people who pine to build and inhabit a society around a single primary identity, and those who desire to live in diverse, pluralistic communities like we do. We really need to draw on the spiritual wisdom and energy of this day, the magic of this moment, to invite a cosmic reset. How do we let go of division and othering, and instead build communities that foster belonging, inclusion, visibility, connection, and empowerment? So, as our reading suggested, we long for this to be a place of repair, a place of picking up the pieces and putting them back together again. And in the words of Rabbi Lu, we all share a common heart. If someone else is suffering, there's no way that we can shut it out. It spreads from heart to heart and soul to soul. A movement that absolutely is irresistible. We need to remember that our essential self is love. And so this soul searching of questions, and by the way, we'll continue unpacking the questions and answering them for ourselves in the talk back after the service, back in the back corner there. Can we hold the ways we've missed the mark with unvarnished truth in a way that can still also hold loving compassion? Can we extend that same loving compassion to those who seem hell-bent on destroying our pluralistic and diverse communities? Where are we complicit in the suffering and hurt that's been seated in our hearts, in our families, in our congregations, and in the larger community? The first step is to turn. turn away from that fear and hate which surrounds us, because it is indeed, as our Eastern brothers and siblings tell us, an illusion. We must turn away from the myths and microaggressions and tropes about ourselves and others, which do not serve in building beloved community. While the media and their monopolies would have us continue to live in the fear and hatred that they're fomenting across cultural and political divides, we need to turn down the volume and instead invite conversations, as was lifted up during the prayers. They might be pretty surface in the beginning, but as the folks at Better Angels will attest, it's the more that we share, that we share more in common than what divides us, if we'll only listen. Tom and I got good examples of that this summer. First with my broken wrist. Well, with Tom still down here at the coast, my sweet yet lightly conservative neighbor took over the gardening, the watering of my labyrinth and my fruit tree gardens in front. And another friend, took over the watering of the gardens in the back, because I was pretty helpless. And Tom experienced it too here on the coast when he shared a meal with a conservative camper on the Siletz River. By the end of the summer, that fellow, even with his right-wing hats and t-shirts, was gifting us with part of his fishing catch. The second step is to return. Return to who we know ourselves to be at our deepest core, regardless of who somebody else thinks we are. The tactic of using hate and fear to silence not only the voices of Kimmel and Colbert, but to silence us too, robs us of our essential knowing of who we are. And when that happens, our silence becomes complicit in the further harms that are unfolding. But it's also to prevent us from seeing the essential self of those who are afraid of what we represent to them. I'm not talking about the oligarchs and the demagogues. They're going to do what they do, primarily because it's about pitting us against each other. I'm talking about the sibling that we can't discuss politics with, or the neighbor flying a Trump flag. We must return to our essential, sacred, and loving selves, and allow the grace for others too as well. I'm reminded of my niece, who firmly believes that vaccines gave her daughter autism. She believed the MAGA talking points and voted accordingly, only for this administration to dismantle the Department of Education. My niece is a teacher's aide. She's already been told that her name is at the top of the list when they start laying off people. So do I say to her, I told you so?
Tempting.
No. I need to extend her grace, knowing that she's scared about how she's going to pay her bills. The third is to remember. Remember that we're all trying to feel safe and loved, no matter which tribe we belong to. Remember that when we stand together, we're strong enough not only to build barns, but to move mountains. We must remember that true gratitude not only flows through to us, but it flows through us when we share our bounty with each other, not only in the building of community, but in the harvesting of community's gifts. But conversely, without that flow going beyond ourselves, we fall back into fear, lack, and hate. One of the prayers that is usually whispered throughout the rest of the year in the Jewish liturgy, it's the third prayer of the Shema, the prayer of unit of reality, in which, God has said, oh, if you do all of these wonderful things and are in covenant with me, it's going to be land of milk and honey and beautiful things. But if you don't do these things, here's what's going to befall you. The lands will dry up. The rains will dry up. Stuff that we're seeing right now with the destruction of our planet. Because we have given into fear, and fear breeds lack, and fear breeds more fear. Bishop Tutu teaches that the quality of human life on this planet is nothing more than the sum total of our daily interactions with each other. Each time we help, and each time we harm, we have a dramatic impact on our world. Forgiveness is nothing less, he says, than the way we heal the world. We heal the world by healing each and every one of our hearts. So we're entering into this dark time, both seasonally and culturally. But we can draw on the energies of this sacred and magical moment to reset the story. We can share our gifts with one another and store them up as we store up our resilience to withstand the winds of change. Because ultimately, just as the darkness and the cold of winter hide the new life that is actually gestating underground, so too this moment can call us to gather inward as communities of hope, to nourish and nurture each other until the spring brings new possibilities of flourishing and growth. May it be so.